Welcome to Red Pill Diaries. I want to speak about the cringe that you get from other level 1 conspiracy theorists who latch on to what they call red herrings in the UK. It's a purposeful distraction to the truth, right? And how what we actually have most likely going on is in all these false flag situations in the world, the ones that are proven to be true, or the ones that are proven to be true and the ones that are also likely to be true, which are a minority overall, I would say. And what they all tend to come with is the truther narrative, right? So let me just read out this theory I came up with. I said I worked out a commonality between all dubious false flags, or at best contested events. They're all well orchestrated, counter to claims that they slipped up or were poorly executed, and require not necessarily the cooperation of authorities, but their willful ignorance or intentional failure, which can be simply achieved by bad actors within the chain of command, predictably poor process, or simply by perverting the flow of information within communication paths. And I don't mean Chinese whispers when I say that. Next, they film or plant intentionally flawed yet believable red herrings, false or misleading evidence, that is, as well as fall guys, gullible-patsies, or other types of human sacrifices like Epstein, Charles Manson, or Brenton Tarrant in the case of the New Zealand thing I've been talking about recently, who is either not of sound mind, has MK Ultra association by whatever rabbit hole links are out there, or was a blatant criminal, but they always seem to have conveniently escaped apprehension, even though they've been made aware to police through multiple reports or concern or actual crimes, like in the case of Epstein. Next, two narratives with supporting material are seeded. Firstly, the mainstream duped to believe, but also defend through emotional attachment, as well as to inflict shame upon non-believers, like how dare you not believe, or my mother, cousin, friend was in this, or as I heard from a very close friend recently, I was in this, or I was part of this, when he actually wasn't. He was actually too. There's a thing called 6 degrees of separation, I think you'll all know about. So when you are 2 degrees separated from something, you're not actually in it, right? And this is kind of the point I was getting at in a previous video, where I said that people will latch onto things and will always find a way that they were somehow directly associated when they actually weren't. It's just a human nature. It's a narcissistic part of our behavior that we can't most of us can't block or look beyond. So I said through narcissistic or even solipsistic attachment, which is human nature. And then secondly, for the skeptically duped, and that is the first level truthers, which is most of us, and which includes me to many extents, when we fail to have proper discernment in each conspiracy theory. By the way, what I'm getting on here is that both sides of the conspiracy are in fact true and false at the same time. So let me get onto this. So where is that? Secondly, for the skeptically duped that latch on to red herring counter narratives, or even the covert aspects of the true story, and in doing so discredit themselves by insinuating the mainstream narrative as totally bogus or actor based, when in fact it actually did happen, but may have required actors and collaborators to achieve both sides. And both sides fail to realize that both sides of the narrative are actually true, while being laced with mistruths. The ultimate mockery. There are 3 camps of non-duped. So this is besides these 2, and this is where the narratives don't get seeded. There are 3 camps of non-duped, and those are actors. Those include actors complicit in the operation at hand, and others that were part of past operations. Through whatever means, they might have been paid, they might have been blackmailed to be part of that. And those that work out the truth and those that feel the energies at play behind the narrative. The latter, those that feel the energies, will often seek truth and end up mistakenly latching on to the red herring counter-narrative and end up joining the others labelled as conspiracy theorists as a method of shaming and discreditation. In the end, multiple agendas are achieved. The main motive, and I've got, for example, 9/11, a reason to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and possibly to demolish buildings too costly to modernise or demolish due to asbestos, as well as other generational or regional community of tinfoil hats, another generation or regional community of tinfoil hats. So you can have people who believe in a conspiracy that's confined to an area like Honduras and New Zealand. To be shamed and identified while sowing division and again mocking the cattle, the parasitic hosts that we all really are when it comes down to when you compare us to the people who control the system, and we have no idea how those people live. They could, for all we know, they could be flying interplanetary for all we know, because we really have no fucking idea. I'm going to just bring in the situation of the video that I uploaded a year ago on the other channel when Red Pill Diaries was still on there. The one that shows the Tic Tac that was given to me by a friend. Again, 2 degrees of separation. My friend's a guy who is discerning. I do trust what he says. And I trust that he knows this guy very well, the chopper pilot, and his explanation of the fact that he may be a pilot, but he's a Luddite when it comes to technology, and he uses a bloody old phone, and that's, again, it happens to be not perfectly clear, but it's a hell of a lot clearer than the videos that the US Air Force gave out. I'll make that one clear right now. I think a similar tactic is used to achieve discreditation of all yet to be proven conspiracy theories and long proven conspiracy facts. The landscape is seeded with intentional red herring false conspiracy theories such as 5G, because I don't believe that one's true. From the knowledge that I have now, I understand there's an old guy who's I did radio ham stuff when I was younger. I learned about RF. This is why I had a business called Meshed. Years ago, did mesh networking. So I know this area pretty well. I understand 5G. I understand 5G Li-Fi and Wi-Fi, how they work. I don't really believe that the DNA disruption part of it. But hey, you can believe that if you want. I'm just saying that I've got quite a lot of knowledge in this area. And that radio frequencies are all around us, from quasars to everything else out there in the universe, which may or may not exist. But if it doesn't, well, even if we're in a computer system, there's something else out there. If you believe the three-dimensional aspects of reality, or that they might coexist within other dimensional, non-physical realms. Anyway, let me get on with this. RF affecting our DNA, which every non-specialist on the topic, or merely people who lack discernment or critical thinking by hook, line and sinker. And I really do believe that the 5G, because 3G and 4G were also had the same kind of thing about them. And yeah, they could be affecting our immune system to a degree. I think that is a possibility. So I'm not going to discount that completely. And that's another thing, is by having discernment, is never to discount everything completely. And this is how I came along this path. My friend has completely misunderstood me here and thinks that I'm saying everything's false, that people didn't die. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they did or they didn't. I'm not saying they were part of it or that they weren't. I'm just saying that the things that were in the video of Brenton Tarrant that were put on that video are not true from anyone that has any experience with firearms who actually watches it. And they will be shamed by watching it or shamed by even questioning it, as I've just seen by one of my closest friends. The kind of words he's using, and he's also gaslighting. I'm gonna say it straight up. He's gaslighting me big time, which I really think is beneath him. But these sort of things can lead to people falling out. Because I'm at the stage now where it's not that I don't see the division that's been seeded, but at the same time, I'm not scared to die, but I'm also I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop believing what I believe to be the truth, and also looking for further truth. When I say believing the truth, getting to the stage that I'm at the moment and still having questions, it's still a good thing to do. It's not good to believe things hook, line, and sinker, because that is how you become effectively a sheep who at the end of the day is getting called in by the shepherd just because you've got shelter there. You've got a big woolly coat. You've got endless grass around the world. So instead of jumping over the fence and being free, you decide to go and be corralled back into the stable for your daily feed or whatever the hell it is that they're going to give you, or your tick soaking that they're going to put on your fur, on your wool. Anyway, I'll carry on here. And the critical point of the story, when something could potentially be done, or prior to serving the narrative's intended agenda, the audiences are, firstly, over 90% duped by the mainstream narrative, fulfilling their role either as apologists or even as voters, soldiers, in the case of the wars in Afghanistan, Syria and others, or facilitators for manufactured consent. And these are, for example, the politicians who will drive for their military-industrial complex to be able to receive horrendous amounts of funding from the tax slaves. Next group is less than up to 10%, but usually far less, that are duped by the duper's counter-narrative for level 1 conspiracy theories that serve to solidify the mainstream narrative. The example I'm going to give here is one of my friends in New Zealand who also doesn't believe this case that happened over there with the mosque shooting. He said, okay, one of the first videos I seen was of a guy who had told the police, and he said, I fucking warned them and he didn't listen to me. He had reported that guy, and he also reported the Bruce Rifle Club as having a lot of nut jobs in it. The police did nothing, and if any one of you have ever lived in New Zealand and know what the New Zealand police are like, they're very efficient, the system's efficient, it's all tied in. New Zealand was the first country in the world next to Sweden that had effectively a cashless system. And they've slowly been moving towards that for years. I had an FPOS card since I was a kid, like in the 1980s, and you can go to the local store, like a corner shop, and you can get your bank balance. You can withdraw money. That was back in the 80s, right? Can you imagine that if we were, Britain was nowhere near that stage, even by the 90s, right? So this is, I'll move on. Oh, sorry, no, I won't. So when I see the video of that Brenton Tarrant took, what I'm seeing is guns that weren't real. But those people might have all been killed. And if they were, it means that we were all convinced that wasn't true to make a fool of us. Now, my other friend says that he directly knows 3 people who had, here's the 3 again, who had reported to the police that they saw people coming through their gardens. They lived within an earshot of the situation. They heard things, and they reported that they saw people coming through their gardens. It wasn't SWAT police. It wasn't the New Zealand police force. It was just random people with guns going over through gardens and through fences. This tells me these could be the people who were actually the assailants of the whole operation. And that Brenton Tarrant was potentially a psyop, kind of MK Ultra plant or whatever, someone else who's is actually a nut job that they radicalized. Who knows? But the shots that he did, well, most of them are not believable. A couple are semi-believable, but could have been faked as well. The situation of the video being uploaded in live stream, there's no evidence that actually was uploaded in live stream. It looks like it was actually just recorded to give the view of having been live streamed and then seeded later on and shared. And then once shared, shut down very quickly. But that shutting down very quickly seems intentional. The same as when the WHO or other organizations remove things from the website, or when Google changes its mantra from being "don't be evil," taking it away, but then adding it in later on to a larger mission statement. These are to build the suspicion that is going to trigger a conspiracy theorist to make a fool out of themselves in most cases. Because most conspiracy theorists, they give you the cringe because they don't understand what they're talking about. They understand part of what they're talking about. And this is why I try to stay away from these things. Unless I'm holding it in the air as a, hey, this is a maybe, you'll always notice that I stay away from saying things are a definite. And people on my channel often, they give a comment, they'll tell me this is that. It's people who clearly know, are less discerning than what I am, telling me that something that I often have more information on, it did definitely happen or didn't definitely happen. It's just, please give me a fucking break. Be more discerning. or at least have knowledge in the field that you're talking about. So the last type is less than 100,000, less than 1 in 100,000. I would estimate that if you take the global population, at least, that know or even just suspect the truth and could possibly make targets of themselves by making it known of what they've worked out, basically. These are the conspiracy theorists that either drop the case with the realization it's not worth their lives being at risk. And this is a different friend of mine who was saying this morning, also in New Zealand, in a different city, Wellington. And he was saying that him and one friend, he says, no, everyone he knows is asleep. He obviously knows conspiracy theorists as well. You get, I'm saying that loosely as in the first level conspiracy theorists, who will denounce everything, right? But he's got one friend, and they both worked out that basically, maybe I should bring it up what he said. It was quite compelling. I'll try and explain it. He basically said that it's better that they basically bury this and just melt into the system, as because it's the only way you're going to get through and not identify yourselves. Look, I've already done that anyway. If I'm on any radar scope, I'm on there already. So I'm just going to carry on doing this. At the end of the day, I'm not scared to die. I'm not scared to, if they're going to lock me up or whatever is going to happen anyway. This is why I live in a slightly more free country, but doesn't mean that I'm impervious or I'm going to be immune to anything that the global system, which is already in place, is going to do to me. But I will not live in fear. Simple as that. Anyway, carry on here. These are the conspiracy theorists that either drop the case with the realization it's not worth their lives, or later expose the theory as fact once everyone no longer cares, or the solid evidence to complete the exposure is long lost or destroyed. Hello, 9/11, and the rubble being removed within 6 days. That's against the law. That was Rudy Giuliani, if I'm not mistaken, who did that. So, again, look, this kind of ties in with people who really believe the Q-tard agenda, that everything's going to be fine. If it was going to be fine, then why was the Epstein case completely dropped like a sack of shit? That's because they're all complicit. That's because he was a fall guy, a sacrificial lamb. Doesn't matter if he's a billionaire. You got to remember, so the people in the background are effectively trillionaires, and when it really comes down to it, the money doesn't matter. It's all about power. I keep saying, don't follow the money, follow the power. That's something that's a false cliche that we use sometimes to think that we're on top of something when we're not. These people could be set up to be that, because the money system itself, as we've seen through the COVID pandemic, is completely engineered, and it's a false economy. Anyone who tries to, people in South Africa, Libya, America, all over the world, Lincoln, all sorts of people who have tried to back a currency, either have a, what would you call it? You would call it a self-sovereign currency that doesn't require the central banks, or to create something that goes back to true wealth. It's coined as true capital or real capital, which are things like land, the earth that we're on. The Queen owns almost all of the land in Britain, for example, and other lords do. So that's real wealth. Everything in front of it is the fake wealth that's a lubrication for the false system, right? That's your money. And look, I'm going to be the first to admit, even though I have the other channel called Cryptoversity, Bitcoin could be another red herring here. The system they're trying to implement around the world is that everyone has a digital ID, everyone has a wallet on their phone, so everything can be tracked. But we have this illusion that Bitcoin can't be tracked, but it can. We also have this other thing where Monero, for example, is an untraceable version. That could be the one genuine thing that is outside the system. Maybe Bitcoin was seeded by people who are part of it, pretending to be separate in the system, but actually still owning it. Knowing that even if they don't mine Bitcoin for the first 10 years, they can still own 90% of it. Look at Grayscale. Grayscale now owns, I think, 10% of all Bitcoin. They only got into buying it within the last 2 years. So this is easily possible with the rigging of the banking systems. The systems are already in place to do trading, to do algorithmic trading. So they have Turing algorithms built into these bots that they trade with. And the bots that mainstream even have access to, and the computing power behind those is nowhere near enough to outsmart those trading bots that they use in Wall Street and Chicago and other places like that. So, which brings me back to the point that do have a stake in Bitcoin, do have a stake in Ethereum, and others like Cardano and definitely Monero, and maybe Dash as well. But remember that what's really important is to have real wealth, own land outright in a country that doesn't have endless regulations like New Zealand. In New Zealand, for example, in America as well, and in the UK also, you can never own land. The system always owns what you have. You're effectively leasing it. Even if you have a leasehold property, you still effectively lease it, because without paying ground taxes, wherever it is in your country they've come up with to make you endlessly enslaved, without paying that, it will be repossessed, which in some cases is ridiculous. The land was never possessed by the government in the first place, but the repossession tells you that they've effectively owned it all along, and effectively always have owned it. They're just taking it back off you again for whatever excuse. So there's probably nowhere that you're free from that happening that I know of, except the possibly Liberland. And that's too small to really own a significant chunk of land anyway. So I would, and the guys I spoke to in Liberland, I just don't trust. I'm going to be straight up with that. I had one of the guys on phone about, when was it again? End of last year. It just seemed to me they were trying to basically collect more Bitcoin. That it was just blatant to me. These guys all have hundreds or thousands of Bitcoin between themselves anyway. I just don't trust it. It's just greed. It looks like greed to me. So that's my quick rundown on Liberland there. So yeah, I'd say that a lot of so-called anarcho-capitalists fit into this. Definitely, what's his face? McAfee, John McAfee. Don't trust that fucker at all. He's a dodgy, seedy fucker. I used to actually think quite highly of him because he was bucking the system, but he's just another cunt. Yeah, so they're really, you've got to keep to the true things, and that is goodness in your heart, the will to do no wrong to others, and to help people where possible that isn't going to hinder yourself. Remembering that we are all potentially controlled by this system. I noticed myself, I don't know if I mentioned it in the video the other day, where I do things to sabotage myself, and I do, like the other day when I was in a bit of a hurry, I squeezed soap onto my toothbrush. What the fuck? I threw away something important in the fire. Something that Anita said this morning was about how when people come into your life with these endless dramas, and then next thing you know, their failure to plan their life becomes your emergency, and then next thing you know, you get all these extra things. And as I was saying to her this morning, one of my friends here just comes around for a beer, and then next thing, oh, another one. I told him I had to do some work, and then that night, that's when there was a massive move in Bitcoin. I missed out, and it cost me at least 30 grand in losses that one particular day. It was a massive move, and this happened more than once. So I'm aware of the fact that, as well as others, can be temporary, Agent Smith downloads from the system where they trip you up. It's like Paperboy, the old game Paperboy, if you've ever played it, where you're going through the street and it's like one of the neighbors comes out with a dustbin, they get in your way and you crash your bike, or you move across and you hit into a parked truck. All these things that are put in your way in life, and we are all part of that. We serve that. How many times have you helped someone to keep their apartment? All right, I think of this friend of mine, Chris, in America, the things I did to help him get his apartment, then keep it later on, only to find that the amount that I lose from helping them is the saying, no good deed goes unpunished, comes from this. And this is why I say that when these seeded parts of the system, these counter narratives that we all go down rabbit holes and believe, that they're put there on purpose by people that know what they're doing. They're not making a mistake. They didn't put a mistake. Like me looking at that video and seeing a guy that shoots twice through a windshield and doesn't fail to break the windshield, doesn't fail to blow his eardrums out, shooting a 12-gauge shotgun a few times inside a car. The pressure that would actually, even if it is in a state, with 4 doors with the trunk area open, it's still, the pressure would be too much to cope with, right? They're not making mistakes. It's part of the whole thing, and as, look, when the other thing I spoke about, that the technology that we have is far behind the technology that the military get first. So when you look at D-Wave and IBM Q-series quantum computing, that likely has existed for years. And if we are in some kind of semi or full simulation, then that's how it's like virtual computing. If you understand what VMware or other virtual computing is, where you effectively have a virtual desktop on your laptop, for example. Well, everything we have is all virtual. Everything we think, all of our brains are all effectively small virtual computers inside a massive supercomputer, as Matt on Quantum Conscience calls the Whopper, the big Whopper computer. Look, this is almost a no-brainer. Look, if these technologies exist, I wouldn't doubt that they do exist. That the qubit technology does exist. Especially if our reality is this fragile, or the linkages between other realities is so thin, then it could well be possible that we are accessing the same versions of things, let alone ourselves. We could exist in multiple planes, but the technology could exist in multiple planes, and that's what qubits could be. That endless instances of the same material in multiple dimensions, right? To deliver, ridiculous computing power. And that computing power could be used by the government to create these scenarios and to make sure, and even the false scenarios, how to put something out that is purposely flawed to make people latch onto it, and then in turn be discredited for latching onto and not having the discernment to see through it. All pretty worrying, because what does this really mean? We're hurtling towards something that is being hung in front of us like a mockery. I remember seeing a thing a while ago about a guy who's deeply religious, who I can't remember his name, and he was talking about, he calls this guy his elite friend, who on his deathbed basically let him know more of the truth about these Illuminati sectors and your 33 or 29 level Masons plus, and how they are privy to more information. So you get the automatic, I'm a Mason, yeah, but you don't really. I know guys from, I know one guy, what's his name again? Used to go drink in my pub, as a friend of my dad's in America. Blake, and he's not the smartest guy. He's addicted to gambling. He continually gets pussy whipped time and time again, and like, oh, this is it, this is love, and I love this girl, and she's gonna be in my life. Oh God, every fucking time, every few months the guy's got a new, like my brother Paul, every few months he's got a new chick, and then it talks about it like it's been a 10-year relationship. You know what I mean? Well, it's the same kind of thing, where they believe they have the right information, they believe they have inside knowledge, but they don't, and that comes back to that narcissistic thing. Hey man, I'm part of this, in what it seems, I was there, I saw the whole thing, when you didn't really. I'm, as I say, I'm guilty of this in the 9/11 case, which I took. I buried my head in the sand for 10 years believing that bullshit narrative, before I started looking into other things. Then, yeah, if this is the case, it means we pretty much can't stop what's happening. But what we can do is just be true to ourselves. We can, for our sanity, we can discuss these things with people who are like-minded people to get a little bit deeper sense of truth, because all of us know more than each of us, And also for sanity, to let you know that you're not alone, that even if it's only 0.001% of humanity, it's still going to be around about 8 million people in the world or something that believe the same as what you do. And so yeah, it gives you a sense that you aren't alone. But another thing that me and Anita were talking about this morning was about, when you decide to, this is the worry about having kids, right? When you think that, one is, you're now at the mercy, you've already been at the mercy of a system, because you potentially fear it, right? You fear death, you might fear death, right? You might not have lived very much, so you're like, oh, I didn't get to do all these things. But at the same time, once you have a kid, well, you don't want to make decisions for them that can be like life-threatening. So maybe you'll recoil and be, become like some little downtrodden, beaten little, oh, please, system, I won't make trouble again, I promise, But at the same time, from what I've learned from my own family, you can be born into a family that you actually have no spiritual DNA connection, if there's such a thing, no spiritual linkage to, or very limited spiritual linkage. They might be a different, sorry, I've got some eyelash in my eye just conveniently. Like if you were to choose, or if we were to become, if we were to be an ascending being that is, has an endless lifespan and is non-physical, and we're flying around the universe and go anywhere we want to, would we really group up with the people who I was born into the same family as? Even my mother and my father, who would I really? After a certain amount of time in conversations, knowing that you're just not the same people, you would probably find like-minded people, wouldn't you? So this might come into the same play as what if a child is born of me? I'm going to protect them. Therefore, I'm going to become more of a system slave again on their behalf because I don't want to cause trouble for them. And at the same time, I might have produced someone who is a tyrant. I might have produced someone who's a criminal, who's a rapist. Who knows? You don't always like the kid. I remember my dad saying very well. And this, maybe some of you will probably say this. Maybe is. How I get my insanity, if you really believe I'm insane, is that he would say things like I love you. I don't always, I don't like you, but I love you. Things like that. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Or you would pass exams, and no matter how well you did, it would always be like, right, but that's still not a reason to relax. You need to do this, study. No matter what you did, it was never good enough. You know what I mean? So maybe this. Damn, I'm losing my place a little bit here. But basically, when I was younger, I kind of got sucked in by that. You always see your parents as being perfect at everything. Then when you work out that when I was about 25 and I was questioning my brother Scott, very blue-pilled system slave, but at least he said one thing that was true. He said, look, the thing you need to understand about my dad, Craig, basically, my dad's full of shit. And that was actually one of the first, internal red pills, as far as my family sector red pills that I ever had, was my oldest brother, who I looked up to, saying that my dad, who he looked up to and I looked up to, was full of shit. I further realized that Scott's a completely blue-pilled moron who doesn't understand anything going on around him. Well, very little, and anyway. And that I would still find people who are not my family who, if the world was coming to an end, I'd rather spend my last minutes around them than around my family. And it's just really sad, and people would say that's really sad. I've got to just put you in the picture here. I don't dislike my family, and they're fabulous people compared to most people that I've met in this world. Most of them are honest, and so I'm including my cousins here as well. Most of them are honest. Most of them are smart. They're good conversation. They would give you the clothes off their back in most cases, except for recently some weird thing my dad did that seemed like a system download because it wasn't in his usual nature. But then again, maybe it is in a hidden nature that I wasn't previously aware of, where he would trip me up, where he would see that I'm going to succeed to such a monumental rate of success that would lead on to me being effectively either completely free of the system or an enemy of the system. If I become a billionaire, I could potentially become an enemy, a threat to the system. So he receives a download. Don't do this simple thing for your son. Even though what he's asking you for is a zero risk, he's never been a risk in the past, he has enough to cover that risk 4 or 5-fold. And yet you won't facilitate him. It's basically like your father or anyone close to you saying, right, you know a famine is coming up. I've found a good fishing spot. I've left 2 of my fishing rods that are better than your fishing rods at home. Can I please borrow yours? If I break it, I'll give you one of mine that you know are much better in every possible way. Or both of them, and them going, no. That's in a nutshell what my father did to me this time last year, right? And why he's not in my life anymore. because if I can have someone who's a system plant, who has done so much for me in my life, he took me around the world when I was a kid, escaping the legal systems that would destroy our lives or take away custody, which he had, because the systems in some countries are biased towards the female. And we know that that's part of a global agenda as well, to emasculate men and not have father figures around them. So he did do that. The things that he did actually allowed me to be red pilled fucking early compared to most people, because I saw through the system. Remembering that red pilled is not a destination; it's a learning curve. So I'm not saying that I knew everything by day one. I'm just saying I doubted the system in my teens. Actually, I doubted the system when I was 9. When I said, 12. When I said, I'll never come back here unless it's with an F-16 bomber. And when I saw the system in New Zealand and what it really was about, extracting money from the family units who could afford it, and finishing up cases very easily from gangster families who had no money over in New Zealand. So with all these things in mind, I would say that there's no point in me having a low profile. I'm already tagged by the system. My channel doesn't get any new. I think I lose between 80 to 140 subscriptions a day now on this channel. On the YouTube one, by the way, a reminder here, subscribe on LBRY. And I will occasionally put videos in there that I wouldn't put on. I removed the one of the Christchurch shooting, just in case anyone's wondering, on the LBRY. Because it carries a 10-year prison sentence and $250,000 fine. I do have to go back to New Zealand sometimes to see my mother. It's not worth the risk. I'd rather point people to other places where but even that might be fucking illegal for all I know. The problem is those places get removed all the time. BitChute can't be trusted. So I would say that I'm not going to carry on, but I would advise in most cases, unless one is you can't wake up people. People will not red pill themselves. Maybe. It's like being, we actually this morning, another thing that, was that you that came up with me, or the thing about it was you, about Amway, how similar Amway is, all these pyramid schemes, how similar they are to what's going on around us. The pyramid scheme is you have a few people who are in on the scam, right? That's the elite. You have a few people in society who will be sucked in by it, and facilitate these people to make horrendous amounts of money. They will, the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's how to lose friends and alienate people. Is be someone who subscribes to Avon or Amway or one of these sort of things, or whatever it is, USANA, and you really believe, you keep on getting that hopium, it's going to work, yeah, because this person's bigging me up, and they fucking know I'm never going to make it. But they just know that unless they can convince enough people to waste enough time, that they will never ever get their little piece of the pie. And that's the ones who are like semi-truthers, you know what I mean? They have a little bit of the truth, but they still don't understand the whole truth, And the whole truthers are broken between those that are part of the system right at the top who make it. This guy, Andrew McKenna, I met his son years ago. He was one of the most successful Amway guys in the world. And his son, I went into his apartment, and I used to be a drug dealer back then, went into his apartment, and he had 2 elevators in his apartment. So it was straight into this is in the Gold Coast in Budds Beach area in Surfers Paradise in Australia. And this place was lush. And then I found out who his dad is, They're living a different level of life. This is what I mean, is a lot of the stuff that I tell you, it comes from experience of being around these people, of being on yachts with fucking super rich people and living this life. You know what I mean? Being almost there, and it having the rug pulled from under me on a number of occasions. People coming into my life, and then me having to defend myself against their bullshit, and then in doing so, and basically falling foul of the legal systems that are put in place to ensnare us all, and to also vindicate evil people. So I didn't just, as Matt says, I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. I have been at this a long time. I've been exposed to a lot of things, a lot of countries, and I know I'm sounding like a fucking up his own arse, skiting asshole right now, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe that's what I am. But at least I'm talking from a position of experience, not second or third hand theoretical nonsense, or stuff that's been laid down like pissed on breadcrumbs, as Matt would also say, because it's just fodder. It's just to It's just to tickle your perversions. In most cases, all these conspiracy people, junkies, it's a fetish, you know, same as many other things in this world. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully this has been a bit of an eye-opener. Hopefully it will stop you going down some rabbit holes and wasting your life, taking effort and energy away from what's really important in your life, and that is that life is not that difficult to live. Just get out of the system as soon as you can. Don't be part of it. This is the problem. The system itself takes so much energy to be part of because you're being harvested constantly, and even when you break free of it, you still are kind of part of it just by paying sales tax, for example. All right, I'll leave it there. Cheers.